An old friend emailed me about a strange, secret website. Sometimes it's hard to believe I've been an internet user for 20 years. That's longer than some of my colleagues have been alive, more than half my life. But the internet still always feels like something new to me. I take it for granted, like everyone else. But at least I remember life before it. When you wanted answers, you had to flip through encyclopedias. When you wanted pictures of Gillian Anderson, you could only scour magazines, or later, download a song which took 30 minutes, and movies were nearly impossible to find because no one had enough hard drive space. The first time I got online was truly exhilarating. I mean, the first time I did it without anyone supervising. Because I knew I could find anything right at my fingertips. Just type it into my beloved Lyco's search engine, and it would be there. Back then, I was interested in celebrity nudes and supernatural mysteries. I was only 13, don't judge me. I was so obsessed with the occult that I even made my own homepage on Fortune City and linked it to the Webbring Darknet, which gathered all the darkest websites and homepages. Pages about magic books, goth babes, occultism, dark art, and a few shocking ones. It was through that Webbring that I met Angelica. Angelica had a GeoCities or tripod homepage that I found particularly captivating. Wait, that's right, it was on Angel Fire. She expertly used fantastic animated GIFs, MIDI background music, and frames, all amazing things back then. Like herself, the website was both creative and alluring, yet very simple. The reason I bring her up is because she just contacted me via email a few weeks ago, asking how I was. A normal greeting. And this is what made it so Angelica. She signed the email with her ICQ contact number. I love that touch of nostalgia. Like someone in the 90s sending a letter with a wax seal, right? I replied with a summary of my life over the past 18 years since I last spoke to her. 18 years, it felt strange to think about. She replied instantly, asking for more details. We exchanged emails back and forth like that. Actually, I was quite eager to get home from work to write to her. Not in a romantic way, simply like reconnecting with the past. It felt odd, but I started to realize something was off. She never actually replied about herself. She ignored my suggestions to text or even talk on the phone. She just wanted to know more about me. That made me wonder if something was wrong. Like she was dying and didn't want to say. So I had to ask her directly why she wasn't sharing anything and if there was anything I needed to know. I reread her previous messages looking for clues, and I noticed something I hadn't paid any attention to before. Her email address was globetrotter.net. I know many people still keep old email addresses and don't bother to change them. But this struck me as strange. Globetrotter was a Canadian internet service provider from the mid-90s. I didn't even know they still hosted. It was like she was deliberately trying to be nostalgic. But there was something about it that unnerved me, as if she was trying too hard to make me feel a hard-to-explain nostalgia. Again, I didn't have to wait long for a reply. She didn't tell me what was wrong. She just asked, "Hey, do you remember the hole?" I don't. Just a vague feeling that I once dreamed of something called the hole. Whatever it was, I had an instinctive feeling it was something bad. I rummaged through my mind for IRC rooms, websites, and news groups, but nothing came up. She sent me another email before I could even reply. "You really don't remember? The hole was our little secret. Not many people knew about it, even fewer knew how to find it, but we found it right there all along. Sometimes when you opened Darknet on Netscape, there would be a tiny black dot in the bottom left corner in a vast white space. You had to hover your mouse precisely over it and click. Then you'd be there. You'd be in the hole. Now you remember, right?" She was right. I remembered. I didn't remember ever calling it the hole, but I remembered that tiny secret space we found. I remembered it was like the browser didn't consider it a real website. There wasn't even an address to copy and paste from the address bar, just seed. I tried everything to pinpoint it to an IP address, but M was all I could find. I remembered, but I never liked that website. There was nothing there, it was all empty. I remembered being excited the first time we found it because it was something hidden and it felt like we shouldn't be there. Then I hated it because it was just empty and it made me feel bad and empty. I never wanted to remember it. I wrote back to Angelica about this. I didn't get a reply from her that night. That was unusual. Usually, she replied instantly. So fast it was scary, as if she had already drafted her replies and didn't care what I actually said to her. But now I was waiting for a reply because this whole thing made me inexplicably agitated, and of course she didn't reply. The next day, when I got home from work, an email was waiting for me. She said we had missed so much. The hole had so much to explore, so many secrets. You could just keep digging and never stop. Like an endless puzzle, everyone else stopped at the first layer, but she felt there had to be something else in it, that no one would create and hide this for no reason. And she kept searching until she discovered how to go deeper. And she kept going. She said it was still there to find if I wanted to look for it. The web ring was gone, Netscape was gone, but the hole was still there. I felt a strange chill run down my spine, but I dismissed it as anxiety. I was about to get a promotion and was a bit stressed. Then I started to wonder if she was playing a prank on me. But Angelica wasn't the humorous type of girl. She would laugh at your jokes. But she didn't really make jokes herself, and I felt she was entirely serious. In fact, there was something about her seriousness that was truly unsettling. I didn't reply to her right away. I decided to check a few things about her because nothing was adding up. I started with her email address to see if she had posted anywhere. I searched for quite a while before I found anything. I didn't find any forum posts or websites. What I found was that her email provider, Globetrotter, had ceased hosting 11 years ago. The email address she was using to write to me was impossible. Why would she go to such lengths to create a fake email address that mirrored the one she might have used in the 90s? This wasn't just nostalgia anymore, it was insane. I was genuinely worried about her, but at the same time, I was worried about myself. I was never that close to her. I mean, we hadn't spoken in 18 years. Why would she suddenly want to contact me? And why just to talk about a long-forgotten website? Because I felt that was what she was gradually revealing from the beginning. It was too strange. I kept digging. I used her ICQ number, her name, the state I believed she was living in. I couldn't find any records of what she was doing. After her Angel Fire page disappeared, there was no Facebook, no Google+, not even MySpace. It was like her last presence on the internet was truly in the 90s. Nostalgia can go too far. I tried not to think about it. By this point, I hadn't emailed her or received an email from her for a week. I felt bad about it, but I had every right. I was losing sleep over this. I knew I'd regret it if I sent her another email. And it seemed she got the hint at first. But then a new email arrived telling me she thought she was getting closer to the center of the hole. But you can spend your whole life in there. I remembered those exact words because they unnerved me. A week later, I received a different kind of email. This email didn't even have an email address, which was creepy enough. But then the content just read, if you receive an email from someone saying they are someone, delete it and forget what you read, no signature. I thought it must be Angelica, but it was too vague. I was truly worried. I thought about calling the police, but I knew they couldn't do anything. I received another email with instructions on where to find the hole. A place on Archive.org's Wayback Machine still had the dot to click. I thought about going in to check. But the truth was, I was afraid to check. Something was wrong with the whole situation. Then another email came from the blank email address. The content was just a link to a Gopher page. Now I hadn't seen a Gopher page in about 15 years. I had to download an old browser just to access it. If you didn't live through that era, Gopher pages just contained a bunch of text files in folders. You would go to Gopher, blah.com. They were often run by universities. This particular Gopher had only a few files. They had different file names, but all the files said the same thing. Help me please. Over and over again. This time I actually called the police. They were polite, but they thought I was being pranked by someone. I asked them if they could at least look into Angelica. I told them everything I knew about her. They said they would try. I stopped receiving emails from Angelica and the blank address after that. I hoped it was over. I think about a month passed before anything else happened. I received a large manila envelope in the mail with no return address. I hesitated to open it, but I did, and inside were printouts of all the correspondence between me and Angelica. Not just the new stuff, even emails I had written to her from the 90s. I barely remembered them, but I recognized my old email address, and the things I said sounded like me as a teenager. The only thing not in it were the emails from the blank address. I took this stack of papers to the police station to tell them something was definitely going on. They said they still thought it was a malicious prank. I asked them why malicious, because that sounded serious. That's when they told me they had received a response from her local police department. Angelica had been a missing person since 1999. Her parents had offered a reward and everything, but there were no leads. One night, she was in her room listening to music, using her computer. The next morning, she was gone. I was so shocked I had to sit down. I had to agree with the police that this was a prank. But at the same time, what if it really was her? Maybe she was mentally ill or something, or what else could it be? What was this thing about the hole? Was it real? And what about the blank email address? I had no clue. And that's what scared the hell out of me about this whole thing. Part 2. After my last post, I decided to seek out any acquaintances I could remember from the time I was talking to Angelica, anyone who might have known both me and her. We had a few mutual acquaintances, mostly people from the web ring, but also people we introduced to each other. It's just that I didn't remember many of their real names. In fact, none. But I did remember a friend who used the handle rapscallion_big. He was a weird guy, into hacking and anarchy. The good, wholesome kind of taboo stuff we had on the internet back then. He had been online for a long time, back to the bulletin board system days. If he was still active, he would surely still be using that username. So I started searching. Not only did I find no trace of rapscallion_big, but I found no rapscallions at all. He used to be all over the internet back then. That was strange. That's when I had the idea to dig out my old computer. It was a 1997 HP, running Windows 98. I had stored it in the basement since I went to college. At least it still had all my old contacts right where I left them. I waited 5 minutes for it to boot up, plugged in the Ether internet cable, and she was ready. It was like she had just been in sleep mode for 2 decades. And there they were, the desktop icons for IRC, ICQ, Netscape, and even Napster. Napster. I had learned that music was more than radio thanks to Napster. Good memories. Anyway, I wasn't really sure if ICQ would even start. I knew ICQ still existed in some form, but I just doubted their servers would still support the old software. One of ICQ's key features that made it ahead of its time was that besides being the only instant messenger, it allowed for offline messaging. I bring this up because ICQ not only started, but started with an offline message. That unnerved me a bit because it was like it was waiting for me, knowing I would boot it up. Except for one detail, the message was dated November 1999. It was from Angelica, so it must have been sent right before she disappeared. It just read, "Are you coming?" I felt a chill. Even stranger, I knew I had used ICQ after November 1999. I figure I used it until about 2001. That's when I went to college. It was like the message was stuck in the server all that time, and I was only getting it now. That made it feel even more ghostly. I closed the message and searched for Rapscallion42. I hoped to just find an email address in his ICQ info. I honestly didn't think I'd see the green online icon next to his name, but that's exactly what I saw. That only made me more agitated. I checked my phone to make sure this was actually 2017. Then I sent a message to Rap saying, "Hey man, long time no talk. I didn't want to just start with business after all this time." I was relieved when he replied with a friendly greeting and asked how I was. Too many strange things had happened. I had half expected him to check if it was really me. After exchanging pleasantries and catching up a bit, I had to ask him why he was still using ICQ after all this time. He said it was because of Y2K. Y2K really happened. It just didn't happen the way everyone expected. It was much more insidious. We all thought computers would stop working because they couldn't handle the millennium change. But it wasn't that they stopped working. Something happened inside the connection of everything. Something bad. Old devices would be fine, but everything created after December 31, 1999 would be tainted. That's why he was still using ICQ and never gave up his dial net zero connection. I hadn't heard the Y2K conspiracy theory in a very long time. It was interesting. I chose to ignore it and asked him if he knew about Angelica's disappearance back in '99. He said no. He thought she just dropped off the internet. Not coincidentally, she disappeared right around Y2K, he noted. If that last message was truly sent in November 1999, then he was indeed correct. Based on his views, I knew Rap would believe me when I told him what was happening, so I poured it all out, and he believed me. He told me it reminded him of something he heard from another old friend recently. There was a guy, Roxburgh, or to his closer friends, Reggie, who used to frequent an internet forum about hacking and freaking from the mid-90s. He had many friends there, articulate and smart enough to earn real respect. Over time, as often happens, he just slowly drifted away from the forum. His posts became less frequent as other aspects of life took over, and then not long after, he vanished. The forum leaned towards anonymity for obvious reasons, so no one kept in touch with him. The forum was still there, not what it used to be, but the regulars were very dedicated. A few months ago, after 20 years of absence, Reggie suddenly appeared on the forum again. His posts were polite, conversational, but something was off, like someone pretending to be familiar. He was trying too hard. He asked about all of them, calling them all, at least the old ones, by their first names. Strange, but they were happy he was alive and well, so they replied to him and updated him on everything, without acknowledging anything they said. He started posting continuously about how his life had been revolutionized. He found a whole new frontier of hacking. Hacking starts from within you, he said, and he wanted to show them. The people on the forum were stunned by his strange behavior, so they started interrogating him. He was silent for about a week, then he sent one last message saying, "I love you guys," with a link. Rapp's friend thought it was just a joke, and Reggie was leading the whole forum to a grand rickroll. He didn't click it because he didn't need to hear Astley, and he was busy with other things. He came back to the forum later and decided he would click the link. What could be legitimate anyway? Suddenly, he refreshed the page first to see if anyone had replied saying what the link was. He saw a reply post from a very trustworthy and respected member of the forum, saying in all caps, "Do not click that link whatever you do." And it wasn't Reggie. That was enough to stop everyone from clicking. The fake Reggie deleted his account immediately. The forum moderator and others tried to find out who that guy was. But to no avail, the person who posted in all caps explained later that he had tried to safely browse that link using an old Linux machine, and whatever was in it destroyed it. And that machine had strict security, he couldn't explain it. Also, before it was wiped clean, he thought he saw a picture of himself as a child appear on the screen. That more than anything else convinced him to warn in all caps, he said he truly felt it was dangerous. I agreed that it was strange to have two internet mystery stories come to him like that, but I didn't see the connection. Rapp went on to explain how this was part of what Y2K brought into the digital world. I just told him to let me know if he thought of anything else that might help, and I would keep in touch. Rapp accidentally mentioned as we were saying goodbye that he still checked my homepage and that I was doing great. Keep it up. That surprised me because I didn't even have a homepage, so I asked him which homepage he meant. He said my Fortune City homepage. He had been reading my updates over the years, even after we lost touch, and he was impressed with how it had evolved. I told him I really didn't understand. I hadn't updated that page since '99 when I made a copy of the Heaven's Gate website. Tacky, I know. And besides, did Fortune City even exist anymore? He swore he had been reading updates all this time. I could tell he was getting angry. He said he wasn't an idiot. He knew what he was seeing. But he couldn't remember what any of the updates actually said. They talked about the future. He knew that, and he remembered being fascinated. Rapp was silent for a few minutes, then he said he was looking at the homepage right now. He could send me a screenshot. It was last updated yesterday, and it was all about what they were talking about and what was coming next. Now this really gave me the creeps, because while I was waiting for him, I had looked it up and Fortune City had ceased to exist in 2012. I told him that couldn't be. He pasted a link to a Fortune City page for me and disconnected immediately after. The link just redirected to Dodster.com. I sent him a few offline messages with my contact information and to let me know if he was okay. I haven't heard from him since, and I truly hope he's okay. I had to get away from that computer for a while. I felt like I was being watched or something. Every noise made me jump. After a sandwich and some tea, I went back, mostly just to turn it off. While I was closing everything, I noticed a folder on the desktop that stood out. Firstly, I never really kept folders on the desktop, and secondly, I didn't remember this folder at all. It was called Noah Escape, which sounded like a terrible Bible game, and I never played terrible Bible games, but it wasn't games inside the folder. It was all photos and files. My instinct told me to just close the folder, shut down the computer, and forget I ever saw it. My curiosity got the better of me. I proceeded to open the pictures. All the pictures were of the same thing. They were photos of me as a teenager. All different dates, all in my bedroom. Just me sitting at my computer doing whatever. Mostly from behind me, some from beside me. What was obvious was that I couldn't have taken any of those pictures myself, but I didn't seem aware of the person taking the pictures. Even though the person must have been right next to me, and I had no memory of anyone taking these pictures. They seemed pointless to take, let alone keep. Now just thinking about it gives me the creeps. Because who took those pictures? Why? The files were the same. They were audio recordings of me mumbling to myself, typing, shifting in my computer chair. Nothing interesting and nothing I could have recorded. Until one file, I finally heard a voice that wasn't mine. It was a voice I had never heard in my life. I would have remembered that. It was a hollow, metallic male voice, almost inhuman. It whispered with a hiss. "Are you coming?" I shut down the computer and left the house. I was so scared I didn't even want to be in my own home. I just drove around for a while and thought of nothing. I still couldn't understand anything that was happening. Nothing else has happened since then. Thankfully, I'm not sure I could take any more. But I don't think I can just ignore this either. I just need to figure out what to do next. I might try contacting some of my computer expert friends and see what they can find. Part 3. As I said in the previous update, I contacted my friend Ben, a real computer expert. He works in it at Grove University. I know it doesn't sound like the most prestigious place, but they actively recruited him. He's good. Anyway, I gave Ben the gist of what was happening and asked if he could trace that gopher page for me. I also asked if he could safely, was there anything about this, the whole page? He said that wouldn't be a problem. The next day, he replied to me with, "Is this some kind of joke? I don't like wasting my time." I had never seen Ben even slightly agitated before. He told me when he traced the gopher page, it turned out it was being hosted right there at Grove University, but they didn't have a gopher page, never had. Even stranger, it was inside the IT department office. I assured him if it was a joke, I knew nothing about it, so he managed to trace the server to a storage room in a subbasement below his office. The subbasement had been abandoned years before he even started working there due to ventilation and mold problems. Now it was just old IT equipment and some storage lockers. Someone had set up the server in a storage locker. That locker itself was completely obscured by old computer equipment and looked like it had been that way for several years. Meaning the server had been running right under their noses all that time. When he got in, he found an old desktop computer. It was connected to a phone line. Beside it was a notebook with the words, "Make it stop," and abracadabra on it, written in the same handwriting. He said it was unsettling. The whole place was covered in thick dust, but the server was still running. He connected a monitor and keyboard to shut it down. And he said the ironic thing was that it had an automatic shutdown date set for that very day, which gave him the creeps, and he doesn't easily get the creeps. When he told his manager what he found, his manager told him there was really only one person who could have set that up. In the early 90s, a guy worked in the department that they all called Milky, because they were milk and he was very white. He was a bit quirky, but then he got burnt out and it got worse. It started with him pounding on his desk. The manager at the time asked him if he was okay. He said, "There's no way out." Ben's boss said he heard Milky say something like, "You think you exist, but you're just another part of it. Everything's just another puzzle." "Do I exist?" he asked. He said it was chilling. Every day around 3:00 p.m., Milky would start standing in a dark corner of the office, facing the wall. He would mumble things. The guys joked that he was praying, but he always left looking sadder than anything else. Once a new guy asked him if he was Muslim, and he replied, "I'm sorry." And the guy said, "Sorry for what?" He said, "It's telling me how your children die." Towards the end, before they fired him, he started telling them about how he found a place on the internet not created by humans. The guys joked it was Skynet because Terminator was a big movie, but he said it wasn't created by machines either. It was always there, and it showed him things he couldn't unsee. Ben's boss even recalled that he started to tear up. The manager said it was sad to see such a smart guy so clearly losing his mind. He was never caught stealing anything, but equipment would disappear on his shift, and it eventually caught up to him. He told them when they fired him that the secret place had gotten inside his head, and sometimes he would wake up in strange places and he didn't know what he had done. Ben said he won't look up the whole for me. The gopher page was weird enough because there was one other thing I should know. The server had a dial-up connection to a very old webcam, low resolution, and the image updated about every 4 seconds. It had been running non-stop since 97. All of them just showed the front of someone's house, the same house from 97. He sent me the pictures because he knew what it was. It was my house, but here's the problem with that. The house that I'm living in now. I only bought this house 2 years ago, so why was there a camera focused on it from 97? I couldn't be the target. So I went back to the police with the webcam information. Anyway, it turned out even though they didn't really think any crime was happening, the local police department was curious, or at least one detective was, because the fact that Angelica disappeared meant there was a potential crime involved in this. He thoroughly investigated this and actually found something. He found Angelica. When he told me she was alive and well, I was thrilled. Of course. He said she willingly left home and chose not to contact her family. She refused to say why, and legally, he was bound to protect her privacy. However, when he told her about how he came to find her, she asked him if she could talk to me. He gave me her phone number. I called her. I was nervous because it had been so long, and I was excited to hear from her after thinking the worst. She answered quickly and asked if it was me. I said yes and said it was great to hear her voice after all this time. Then she said, "No pleasantries. I didn't send you those messages." I told her I had figured that out. That's when she dropped the bombshell. "I don't think you understand," she said. "I have never once in my life sent you any kind of communication before now. I don't know you at all." I felt a bit shocked, a bit nervous, and angry because part of me thought she was lying. But what if she was telling the truth? I told her she must be mistaken. I found her through her GeoCities homepage on Angelica and I described the page to her. She said she didn't create that and I should never go there. It was bad. She wouldn't say anything more about it. Then I told her all the details I knew about her personal life, about her likes, hopes, dreams, and family. She said it was all true, but whoever told him about that, it wasn't her. That's why she wanted to talk to me now, to let me know the truth. She remembered it used to happen occasionally a long time ago. She would have people tell her they talked to her online all night, but she knew she had never talked to them. And they would tell her she was doing things she knew she never did. She was sleeping, or sometimes not even in the city, then they would get weird or disappear. She remembered once she was doing math homework and some random guy messaged her with the solution to the problem. She was horrified, but she asked him how he knew her math problem. Was he stalking her? And he told her no. She had asked him for help. She didn't believe him, so he sent her a screenshot. That message was from a day before she even got the homework that day. She said the worst was when she messaged a close friend of hers whom she saw online on ICQ. Her friend replied with, "Who is this?" She thought it was just a joke, so she said something silly. She didn't remember anymore. Her friend said she didn't think hacking Angelica's account was funny. Or, "If this is your brother, stop." Angelica swore it was her, and her friend replied, "Well, I know you're not Angelica because Angelica is sitting right here with me." She knew this friend wouldn't joke like that. She didn't have the imagination for it. Whatever it was, her friend genuinely believed she was in the room with her, but she wasn't. Her friend always insisted she was there that night. She said Angelica was showing her her amazing new homepage. The friendship broke up after that because her friend got weird. That was the first time she saw the homepage, and she knew it was bad luck. I asked her if she ever heard of thehole. She was silent for so long I thought we lost connection. She said she was still there. She just never thought she would hear that again. There was a guy who used to harass her when she was about 12 or 13 on IRC. He called himself Holy Moses. He started out nice. He seemed to understand all her problems and knew what she was thinking. At 12, that felt romantic. But she noticed strange things, like he didn't seem to have a life or personality. Any time of day, he was always online and active, but no one knew anything about him. One day, he started telling her stranger things. Like, "Do you remember the 3 men dressed as bees at the Halloween party?" She had no idea what he was talking about. 8 years later, at a college Halloween party, she saw 3 men dressed as bees sitting in the corner of the room. They weren't doing anything, just sitting still and staring at the floor. Then they turned to her and their eyes looked very black. She ran out of the party. Another time he told her, "You can drink and smoke. You know, you die in a car accident." It scared the hell out of her. She briefly wondered if she was actually a ghost, she said, when she told him to stop telling her such things. He said there was a place she could go just for special people, and she would never need to go anywhere else. It was a place on the internet infinite in every direction. She said she remembered him saying that specifically, and everything she needed would be there. It was called the H, and she just needed to send him a message with the letter to go there. She actually tried to do it because things weren't going well for her, but she sent the letter by accident because her hands were shaking. Holy Moses disconnected, and she didn't see him after that. Until 2010, when she received an email from the New Commandments at Holomoses, saying, "Are you coming?" If anyone was impersonating her, she said that was the most likely person. At the time, she was too naive. Looking back at it now, talking to me, she said he was the scariest person she had ever met. Just thinking about him gave her the creeps and made her afraid that somehow he would sense it and come find her. She said that was all she had for me and not to call her again. I thanked her for her time and wished her the best in life. I think I'll need time to process all of this. Part 4. I'm still reeling after the conversation with the real Angelica. I went over it again and again in my head. Like, maybe the police were wrong, so of course I never talked to this woman. She's the wrong Angelica. But then how do I know everything about her? The scariest part is the sheer commitment and dedication in deceiving me through years of innocent conversations. That kind of obsession is insane, and I'm nothing special. I'm just an ordinary guy. The biggest clue I have now is the creep's name, Holy Moses, so I decided to log into IRC and see if I could find him. Angelica told me he was all over the place when he was harassing her. It's been a long time since I used IRC. I barely remembered how it worked. I was introduced to IRC by a group of furries before I even knew what furries were. With a server called IFNIT, that was an adventure. Anyway, it soon started coming back to me. There were a lot of channels on AFNET that would take forever to go through, so I decided to focus on channels that might have been relevant to Angelica back then. I just started asking in channels if anyone knew about him or had heard of him. But every time I mentioned Holy Moses, the channel fell into almost complete silence. I didn't get a yes or no, I was left hanging. Sometimes users even started leaving the channel. I was about to give up and try another way when I received a private message from U4728 for you. He or she, I guess, told me I shouldn't be doing what I was doing. I asked him why. He said it wasn't well received by them, whatever that meant. And Holy Moses was just a bot existing forever, never logging off and almost always idle for a day at a time. I told him if that was the case, why was everyone so reluctant to talk about it? I didn't want to tell him Angelica's story. I just wanted to find out what he knew. He said the whole thing creeped everyone out because no one knew who created Holy Moses. No one. Over decades, no one even claimed ownership, not even the trolls. No one knew where it came from or why it was there. It didn't do anything. It just is, he said. That's the most horrifying thing about it. Legends had built up around him, like it was a government supercomputer monitoring IRC, or it was the KGB or a ghost. A bot still running long after its owner died, and his bank account kept paying the bills. But no one knew it just was there. Users had tried messaging it, and it never replied. It never interacted in any channels. It provided no services. It had moments of obvious activity when it was no longer idle, but no one could detect it doing anything during this time. Except occasionally it would switch channels, seemingly at random. He said there was only one time it did something significant. As far as anyone knew, once in over 2 decades, and it just made everything weirder. I was sending messages to ask him what it was because he wasn't saying. But right then I heard something that sounded like my front door slamming shut. I stopped and listened carefully, trying not to even breathe. I didn't hear anything, so I rushed to the front door. No one was there. The doors were closed and locked. I put it down to anxiety and went back to the office. When I got back, U4728 for you had sent me a message saying, "Where did you go? Hope nothing strange happened." I ignored it and asked what Holy Moses had done. He said, "Okay, I'll tell you." In 1999 at 5:00 a.m. CST on December 31, Holy Moses joined the Ornithology channel and made a series of short pronouncements. First, deceive them at 7:00 a.m. Empty it at 9:00 a.m., abandon them at 6:00 p.m. Turn back at 9:00 p.m. and have it your way just before midnight. Then it disconnected until January 5th. Why? He asked. Why years of silence and futility to do that and then never do anything again? Sometimes when I really think about it, it gives me the creeps. That was all he knew, he said, or anyone knew. And he reiterated that I really shouldn't be looking into this and just to ignore it. I thanked him for the help. I remembered a bit more about the commands MyRC had after getting used to some, so I tried a /whois on Holy Moses to see if he was out there. He was, or it was. It was in a single channel, Steal Life. It had been logged in for 16 days and idle for 3 days. Its IP was just an I. I was thinking about going into the channel and messaging him to see what would happen, but I received another message from U4728 for you abruptly. I told you to ignore it. Where is your mother? I closed IRC immediately and walked away. I thought it was just some nut trying to scare me, and it worked. But after it sunk in, I realized I should call my mother and make sure everything was okay. Thankfully, Mom answered the phone fairly quickly. I asked if everything was okay. Mom said, sure, except for my little prank. Immediately, I felt a cold chill. I hadn't done anything. I tried to calmly ask her what prank. Mom said, two guys, they showed up with a note from you to let them in. They didn't say anything or do anything. They just sat there with their chairs pulled up in Mom's kitchen, just staring at the floor. You didn't recognize them at all? I asked Mom. Mom laughed and said no, but I think Mom was starting to realize I didn't know what was going on. They were wearing costumes, Mom said almost as an afterthought. I told Mom to calmly get out of the house and call the police because I had nothing to do with this at all. Mom said she was upstairs. She would have to go past them to get out. I told Mom to stay on the phone with me until she was out. I listened carefully. It seemed to take forever. Finally, Mom said, they're gone, the front door was left open. I told Mom to call the police right away and check in with me later. While talking, I had unconsciously walked from the office to my own kitchen. My front door was also left open. Not only was it locked just a moment ago, but it seemed like a pretty big coincidence. I closed the door and locked it. Then I looked throughout the house with a kitchen knife in my hand. I have a single-story house with a basement, so it was easy enough to cover all the hiding places. No one was there. I figured the door wasn't latching and the wind just opened and closed it. Still, I was on edge all night. I kept dismissing it. Until 2 days later, my neighbor came out and asked me if I was having a costume party. I said no. That's when he told me he saw two guys in bee costumes leave my house 2 days ago. After leaving my gate, they just walked straight across the road and behind the neighbor's house into the woods. How could they see in the woods at night? He asked. I went to the police with all the new information I had. All these strange events barely seemed coherent at all, nor did they seem illogical. They all seemed thinly linked in some secret way. The police were confused. They also had my mother's report, so they conceded someone was harassing me. As we were doing the report, my mother told me she was thinking about something right after this happened because it struck her as strange. Do you remember you had that dial-up modem, and when you ran it, you could swear there was a little voice inside it talking to you? The way Mom said it, it was like it was nothing, sending a chill through me because I didn't remember that at all. What? Was all I could say. This is what Mom said. Well, you would boot it up. And in all the beeps and pops, you said there was a little voice in there with a message. To me, it was a lot of crazy noise, but you made me come very close and listen. And you told me it was saying, everything's better in here, abracadabra. I can't believe I still remember that. I told Mom I couldn't remember that. It sounded crazy, but Mom just looked at me with a blank stare. I thought maybe she was worried, so I started telling her about what was happening. The whole Angelica thing so Mom would understand. I was saying, do you remember that girl I used to chat with online in the 90s, Angelica? Mom kept looking at me with a blank stare as if she couldn't understand me, so I told her more. How I met her on the web ring that my Fortune City page was on, and you don't remember at least my homepage. Mom shook her head. What she said next scared me in a way I had never been scared before. Mom told me, I got an internet connection after you went to college to email you, but before that, we never had internet in our house. I said she must have hit her head because I distinctly remember all these experiences being online building my homepage IFNIT, IRC, ICQ. All that was when I was in high school. Mom refused completely. She said she remembered, however, that I used to tell her I had found a way to get on the internet without a connection. I would have to dial some number with my modem. Then I would have to sit still in front of the screen for a few minutes, something like that. Mom always thought I was joking. Before Detective Thorough came to find us, Mom looked me in the eye and said, you should be careful on that internet, you know? And got up to shake the detective's hand. I was grateful to be off the topic. The detective offered to have a friend in computer forensics look at some of the websites I had reported. But he didn't have much hope. I went to the casino after that to drink and waste money. This thing was getting more confusing by the moment. Part 5. I continued to argue with my mother after my last update. I still didn't remember anything my mother told me, but Mom guaranteed there was no internet at her house when I lived there. Mom said I had floppy disks that I brought home, but that's it. We argued for a while before I suddenly thought to ask where I brought them home from. Mom said she didn't know. I would go out sometimes, and I would come home with disks. I had a Sterilite bin full of them in my closet. None of them were labeled, so Mom didn't know how I had any idea what was on each one, but I seemed to know. Mom remembered how I would dive into the bin and rummage through all the black disks and leap up with the exact one I wanted. Generally, Mom didn't invade my privacy. Mom said, I only saw you do it a few times. I don't remember any floppy disks. Either my mother is feigning weakness or I'm losing my mind. Both possibilities are worrying. My mother is a genuinely good person. Since Dad passed away a few years ago, she's been going through a tough time. But she's extremely caring, doesn't like to see anyone hurt. She could see I was genuinely upset, not just trying to be right, so she hugged me tight and she told me I should ask Ricky. I hadn't thought of that. Ricky was an old high school friend of mine. Well, we were friends from second grade until we left for college. We just drifted apart. I have him as a friend on Facebook and we never talk. Mom said when I went out to wherever I went, I usually had Ricky with me. We would walk all the way across the bridge into town to spend our weekends. I decided to take Mom's advice. I messaged Ricky on Facebook. He replied really fast. I was surprised because I never saw status updates or any activity from him. I asked him if he was free to talk on the phone. I was afraid of another internet-only conversation about these things. Facebook said he was typing a reply for about 5 minutes before my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number and I knew I never gave my number to Ricky, so I hesitated. While I waited, Ricky started typing. Over and over again, so I answered. The voice on the other end sounded like Ricky, as much as I could remember, but it was like he was very far away on a broken CB radio. I don't know why, but it made me feel strange and uneasy. I said I thought we had a bad connection. He said that was the best it could be, and he knew. I was about to ask him what he knew when he said, "Dobra bird watch," and hung up. I received a message on Facebook saying it was good catching up. He didn't reply to anything I said after that. I used to browse news groups as a teenager, mostly for pornography and alt-binaries groups. Now I had to look up how to get into news groups. I remembered being able to do it through my email software, but apparently that wasn't an Outlook feature. I looked up news group readers and found one I used back then, Fort Agent. I found some servers and started searching for Alt-W Birdwatch. When I finally got in, I found it was mostly upskirt photos. I didn't understand why Ricky wanted me there, until I saw a post with the title, "Remember the Dog?" and immediately felt a chill. I don't know why, but there was something about it, something from my past. This is what the post read. Does anyone remember sometimes you would go in there, and it would be all dusty, and no one would be there like it was abandoned years ago, but you could still sit at the computer and get online? And remember sometimes you would go in and there were people there, and they were really weird, and they would just watch you like you were a rat in a maze, and sometimes they wore costumes. Does anyone remember the dog? Sometimes there were no people and just this dog at the counter. I think it was a golden retriever. It never panted, but it watched, and sometimes it made you do things. That was it, and that was enough. I trembled slightly. No one seemed to reply, and the post was 3 years old. It certainly seemed out of place, but I knew what she meant, and I was starting to remember now. I remembered at least that there was an internet cafe in town. It didn't last long. Like most internet cafes, it popped up around 96-97 to capitalize on the internet craze and allow people who didn't own computers to experience it. As personal computers became more common, they died a quick death. This cafe was popular with young people in 96. It became boring after that. That's when something happened to it. It changed management or something. It changed. We tried to go back just to hang out, but most kids didn't want to be there. I had some friends who just wouldn't go or say why, but Ricky and I would hang out there all the time. Why couldn't I remember that before? My mother was right all along. I replied to the news group message with, "Why can't I remember?" It was a long shot since the post was so old. Then I started looking through other posts to see if there were others like it. There were others, they were all vague. But I knew what they were talking about. I don't think I've ever been so unnerved. Someone posted. Sometimes when we hung out, we thought we were only there for about an hour. But when we went out, the whole day had passed. And when we talked about what we did there, we had completely different stories. Even though we were together the whole time, it was like an acid trip and we were stupid kids, so we kept going. The Egypt, that was the name of the place. None of these people would say its name, but I remember it now. That strange little internet cafe. Right after the post office where I didn't even realize there was commercial space before. The Egypt. Someone posted, "There was one time my friend dragged me along and I didn't feel like being there." The owner or employee or whatever wasn't there that day. It was the dog. I don't like to think about it. Remember how it never panted. Somehow that stands out after all this time. We were just messing around, nothing special. When I looked at my friend's screen, he was watching a live webcam of my bedroom, just staring at it. I thought this was a stupid joke, but it made me angry. I told him that was weird and I didn't consent to a webcam in my room. He just said something was going to happen that chilled me because he wasn't joking and it didn't even sound like his voice. This is what scared me the most. I decided to leave, but needed to pee first. On the way out, I walked past my friend and he was still watching the webcam. That annoyed me. But worse, when I looked at the screen, there was someone in my bedroom rummaging through everything. Under the mattress and the drawers, I was ready to go home and get one of my dad's golf clubs. Then the guy looked straight into the camera and started taking it down. I saw the guy's face. It was me. No doubt about it. It was my face. How could that be? You're thinking the webcam wasn't live, but it was. Someone replied to that post with, "When you were in the bathroom, did you try knocking on the wall?" Someone knocked back. Someone replied to that, "I knocked. He said he would let me in, but there was no door." In a sea of bird-watching photos and upskirt photos from '95, that was all I could find. I closed it. Too much. I was scaring myself. But later in the day, I got a reply to my post. It read, "You are not meant to remember." I sensed it then that something really bad was going to happen in that place. I reconnected with my friend Ben to see if he could help me identify those people. Because I didn't recognize any of the names from town, but surely that tiny business didn't have locations in multiple towns. Ben replied to me with a final, "Thank you." He said, "The news group I'm talking about doesn't exist, and there are no such posts on Alt-WD watching." He said he went ahead and traced the link I gave him to the hole. He was able to link it to a specific address that he gave me, and I recognized it. It was the address of the government duplex I grew up in. It seems like every answer is just more questions, but I'm determined to go back to my hometown and check it out. If I find anything, I'll let you all know. Part 6. My hometown isn't too far from where I'm living now. I moved away for college, about a 4-hour drive. My mother moved closer to me after Dad died. I don't go back often because there's not much pulling me there. I heard from Mom that they decided to abandon the housing complex I grew up in. For some reason, they couldn't sell the houses and didn't have the budget to renovate, so the town simply left them to rot. When I first heard the news, I didn't care much. I tried not to be sentimental, but I was bracing myself to see the place again, the place where I had so many memories that shaped me. The days watching the real Ghostbusters in my fuzzy Star Wars pajamas, the days watching the X-Files with Mom, the days lying in bed all summer reading books about UFOs. Of course, I realized it was now just an empty space, nothing in common with those memories besides the footprint. All that went away when I got inside. I snuck in through the window I used to climb through when I forgot my keys. The moment my foot touched the floor, music started. It was faint and distorted, so I couldn't make out what it was. But I was certain it wasn't playing until I entered. Someone else had to be inside and know I was inside. And that scared the hell out of me. I waited for another sound besides the music, but there was only the music. I felt a little braver, so I started to move towards the stairs. The music got louder but no less distorted. The melody was familiar. I went up the stairs slowly. That's where my old room was. When I reached the top, I knew what I was hearing. Early in the Morning, by Vanity Fair, an old song, and it was playing from a dirty old radio placed in front of my bedroom door. That was strange because the song was on repeat. I turned the radio off. I realized I had just signaled my exact location by doing that. I broke out in a cold sweat for a moment, waiting for something to happen. But all I heard now was a buzzing from inside the room, like a beehive. I also saw my nameplate was still on the door. Surely other people had lived here after Mom left. Why would they leave it? I opened the door. I didn't and still don't know how to react to what I saw inside. The room had been set up to look exactly as it did when I was a teenager. Not like it was after I left for college or even just before that, like it was in 1999 down to every detail. Halloween lights around the desk, Fangoria posters on the wall, my old Mr. T pillow on the bed. Someone had to know my room in intimate detail to be able to do this. Who could and why? It made no sense at all. Then there were some details that were wrong, but in a way that seemed deliberate. Like on my Candyman poster, it said it starred Tiny Lister instead of Tony Todd. And the wall was painted with the same kind of stucco, but the color was off by a shade or two. Things like that, they were everywhere. That made me more uneasy than the recreation itself. I found where the buzzing was coming from. The computer. It was running. Maybe Ben was right about the hole. I sat down and activated the monitor. Like the rest of the room, the desktop was a faithful snapshot of 1999. every icon exactly as I remembered it. I couldn't find anything running abnormally. It just felt like I had been transported back in time. That's when I noticed one thing out of place with my desktop. An icon in the corner, almost off-screen, called Milk and Honey. I never had such a file. I was certain of it. I started moving the mouse over it. I felt strange, afraid to open it. Before I could, the radio started blasting early in the morning again. My heart almost stopped. I looked behind me, expecting the worst. No one was there. I got up to turn off the radio, but it was still off. I checked the batteries, and there were none. That's when I realized the music wasn't coming from the radio. I wanted to get out of there. I'd felt scared before. I don't think I'd ever known what terror was before that. Not truly, but I had to find out what Milk and Honey was. It loaded a telnet connection. I hadn't seen one of those in a while. The connection worked because within seconds an ASCII mountain filled the window. I waited and waited for something to happen, but nothing, just the mountain. I tried sending some input. I even wondered if the connection was dead. I was about to try again, but I received a phone call from the detective right then. The first thing he asked me when I answered was, "Are you alone?" I thought that was strange, but I told him I believed so. But I wasn't sure. He asked me where I was. I told him. He said I needed to get out of that house and calmly get into my car and drive back to him. I had never heard him speak like that before. Something was definitely wrong. I was ready to listen, but I wanted to know what was happening. He said he had a hunch about something and decided to check back with Angelica to make sure everything was okay. Everything was not okay. He said the girl he had given me contact information for 2 weeks ago was not Angelica. They didn't know who that woman was because no one could find her. The house she was in was clearly a rental between tenants. No one was living there at the time. All they found left behind was a detailed script of what she was supposed to say when she talked to me. I was speechless. And confused, I had just readjusted my thinking to believe everything with Angelica was a lie. And now the truth about the lie was also a lie. Did that make the lie true? But it was worse. Detective Thorough said he had recontacted Angelica's family and asked many more questions. Many more. She had every message I ever sent her printed out. Photos of me, maps of my hometown, a doll. He said in some of the photos I was clearly sleeping. Did I know about any such photos? I couldn't say. He took my silence as a no, and he was right. There was more, he said, but you need to get back here right now. Calmly, I thanked him and prepared to do exactly as he said. That's when I noticed something else had happened on the telnet screen. There was a question at the top. "Are you alone?" That's what the detective had just asked. That was scary enough. I typed, "I don't know." Then text started appearing very slowly, word by word. I took a picture so I could type it out as it was. Set as a warning, transmitted be dilat, after huck this dev shoot it all down get save yourself. It repeated 3 times, then the connection ended. I wasn't sure what to do. Smashing the computer didn't feel right, so I just pulled the power cord from the back. I stood up, ready to calmly exit as the detective had said. I thought I would be okay, but I saw something that will never leave me as long as I live. There were strands of black hair drifting out from under the bed. I froze where I stood and just stared at them to make sure I was seeing correctly, that it wasn't just lint because the area was dark. As my eyes adjusted, I realized I wasn't just looking at hair. I had been staring straight into someone's eyes for half a minute, and whoever that was had just been staring back the entire time. I screamed and I ran, jumping a few steps at a time to the front door. I was determined never, ever to go back there again. I didn't know who it was. I didn't want to find out. Knowing I was watched that entire time, it still feels like those eyes are looking at me. That has ruined my memory of that place forever. One more thing before I end this update. I went to where the Egypt used to be before I left town. It had been converted into a pub. There were people there, so I felt comfortable going in. I had a much-needed glass of wine and asked them how long they had been there. Coincidentally, I was talking to the owner. He said the place was a forfeiture that he snagged in an auction. The previous owner just abandoned everything. The computers were still running when he moved in. He thought they were stealing electricity from the post office. I told him I used to come here for the internet. Then he said my name and asked if that was me. I wasn't sure I wanted to answer, but I did. I told him yes. He said there was a small box left behind with a note requesting that it be given to me. It was Jack. He said it was just old floppy disks. But he liked the mystery of it, like a message in a bottle, so he kept it. I had to buy a drive before I could even read what was on them. I wasn't sure how to interpret it. Each disk had a picture of a different teenager. some information about each person, a bunch of bookmarked websites, and copies of various internet activities. All of them had two commonalities. They were all missing children, and they all had internet contact with Angelica. Except for one of them, that was Angelica herself. I turned it over to the police. This thing is beyond my comprehension. Part 7. A lot has happened since the last update. It started when I handed the floppy disks over to Detective Thorough. This became a huge deal with the RCMP because it connected a bunch of cold missing persons cases that no one thought were related. The problem was the cases were all from '99. Not long after I handed in the disks, the detective came to ask if I was absolutely certain that the pub I had gone to was behind the post office. I confirmed. He said I must be mistaken because the place was empty when he went. Well, it must have been closed for the day, I thought. When I was there, they had quite a few customers, a gambling machine in the corner, a TV loudly playing a sports game. It was a pretty busy place. He said I didn't understand him. It was empty, there was no pub there, no business at all. That building had been abandoned for years. It was covered in dust and had nothing but a few old computers leaning against the wall to prove anyone had ever been there. I felt like I was going to faint. I knew I had just been there. I had talked to the bartender. I had had a drink. How could it just vanish? I told the detective he could get fingerprints off the disc box. The bartender had handled it with his bare hands, and it was the only building behind the post office. I didn't know what to say to make him believe me. Then he said with a chuckle, "Oh, there was one customer, a stray dog. I didn't even know how it got in, everything was sealed up. I didn't think anything of this, until he said it's been with me ever since." "Good dog." I asked if it was with him now. He said yes. I felt a chill run down my spine. I asked him, "It's a golden retriever, right?" He asked me how I knew. I didn't try to explain. I found the first excuse to hang up. He had told me he had been to my old house. Apparently, someone had been squatting there. He conceded. They confiscated the computer to be sure, but there was nothing mysterious, and the thing under the bed was a doll. He even sent me a picture. I told him the thing in the picture wasn't what I saw. My eyes saw something wet, and it saw me. I couldn't blame the detective for starting to doubt me. Nothing about this made sense, and everything I thought I understood turned out to be something completely different. Even I was starting to doubt myself. I wanted to keep myself busy, so I started doing some research into local records to see if I could find out who owned the place. I expected to find some change in management in the '90s or where it was sold in the 2000s. But there were no such records because it was never sold or changed management. It was bought in 1980 and had the same owner ever since. A company or organization called The New Way. It didn't seem possible it could be the same owner because the place was never used before Egypt. In 1980, there wasn't really internet. Who would buy a place and do nothing with it for 15 years just waiting for the internet to happen? I just couldn't find anything else. Nothing about that company at all. It's hard to describe the feeling of loneliness I've been feeling in recent weeks. I've talked to so many people about it, but their help is limited. That's why I decided to try going back to Outree Word Watch if it was still there. At least there's someone might be having a similar experience, and I had no trouble finding it again. I really don't know why Ben couldn't, so I posted my message. I asked if anyone else had heard of The New Way, then I waited. Surprisingly, I received a call from Ben shortly after. He asked me if I had done anything recently. I asked him to be more specific. "Ed, you must have done something because something has happened." I still didn't know what he meant. He sounded strange. His words were a bit slurred and there was no tone anywhere in his sentences, just a string of words. "Something is happening right now," he said. "I've reactivated it." Ben is just the most blandly rational guy. Something was definitely wrong when he was acting like this, so I asked him if he was okay. He said, "I need to check my messages." I asked, "What messages?" "Listen," he said, "you have to check your messages. They've been waiting for you." The whole thing didn't feel right at all. I asked him again, what messages did he mean? All I heard were small whispering sounds like "papsest." I thought I was losing him. But when I listened carefully and turned up the volume, I heard him saying, "Please," repeatedly. I felt like I had a pit in my stomach. I asked if he needed help. Was there anything I could do? He was silent for a few seconds. I said, "Ben," still silent. Then he screamed, "Please," so loudly I dropped the phone. I quickly put the battery back in with trembling hands. And then I called for a wellness check on him. I also called Grove Campus just to be sure. I didn't know what else to do. I had never experienced anything like this. I checked my email right after to see if I had anything from him, but I didn't. I had no voicemails. The only other message I could think of was ICQ, so I booted up the old computer again to check my ICQ account. Maybe there was nothing, I just had to be sure. It felt like it took forever to boot. When it booted, I had a message waiting. It wasn't from anyone I recognized, but I didn't think it was from Ben. The name on the account was Constance. The message said, "Heaven." There was a link to a video. I clicked on it. The download box said it would take 30 hours to complete, so I just let it run. I also tried to reply to Constance, but ICQ warned me that the account had been disabled. I also couldn't find any results on any search for such a person. I didn't think Ben would ever create such a fake account. But how did Ben know about the message? I was contacted by campus security at Grove University. Later in the day, they asked me when was the last time I spoke to Ben. I told them. They said he hadn't come to work for several days and wasn't answering his phone. I was the last person to hear from him, and they advised me to file a missing person report. I did. So far, nothing has happened. I'm worried about him. The next day, I received an email replying to my post. I recognized the address as the same person who posted about the dog. She said I needed to call her urgently and provided an 1800 number and a series of numbers and letters, 472 BM. I got an interactive menu system for a company that supplied tanning equipment. I pressed each number in the order she said, and the system said I was being transferred to an account specialist. I heard someone pick up the phone almost immediately. She said, "You went back to the cafe, right? You shouldn't have done that. Was it the pub?" I think I gasped. She said she couldn't talk long, so I just had to listen. She wanted to tell me something that might help me. She said she started remembering about a year ago. She remembered the sessions at Egypt. They preyed on vulnerable, unintegrated children. Anyone who came there was gradually introduced to this website called The Hole. When they showed it to us, we had to sit there and study it, solve its puzzles, but it would change us. That's what they always said. She didn't know if they built it, but that's all they cared about. "This is what to remember," she said. "I think we're still in the hole." I tried to ask her what that even meant. What was she talking about? She hung up before I had a chance. I haven't heard from her since or from Detective Thorough. Still no news about Ben. I don't know if I'll get any further. Every step forward is 3 steps into the fog. That's what it feels like anyway. But I have one more thing. The video file finally downloaded. I knew what I was looking at the moment the video started playing. It was camcorder VHS footage inside Egypt. It had been a long time, but it came back to me quickly. There was no timestamp, the footage was blurry and the tracking was off, but I knew it. We were all there, sitting at our computers with our backs to them, staring at a blank wall. I could recognize myself in the group. We were just sitting there, staring straight ahead. No one was moving or saying anything. I couldn't make out what the computers behind us were doing, but we weren't touching them. What were we staring at? What were we doing? Why was I doing this? I couldn't remember anything about it. I was the only one who ever looked away from the wall. I kept glancing towards the back of the bar. It was hard to tell, but I think I was scared of something. I looked scared. I stared at the area on the screen where I kept glancing. The tracking lines interfered, but they blurred a bit and I could make out it was the dog. And as I saw it on the screen, it turned and looked straight into the camera and didn't look away, like it knew I was watching. I know it's crazy, but it gave me the chills all over. I turned off the video there, and I don't intend to open it again. Part 8. I'm still pretty shaken up and I'm done with this, but I'll do my best to explain this clearly. So I continued researching the new way because there had to be something to it. I was able to find a record that listed the owner's name, Joseph Vanish. That name wasn't familiar to me. I looked for obituaries, phone directories, anything that could lead me to him. I didn't think to look for missing persons, but I stumbled across it. An old homepage asking for, "Help us find Uncle Joe." I emailed his niece from the listed address asking for more information. The page was created in '99, so I didn't expect the email to work, but it did. I received a reply the same day, asking how I knew Uncle Joe. I wasn't sure how to reply, but I decided to go with honesty. And I'm glad I did, because this is what I received that night. I'll put it all in one email because I don't want us to have to talk again. Uncle Joe was a good man. He used to be a theosophist minister. He raised me after my parents died in an accident. He was good with electronics. He thought computers were the future. That's why he called his company The New Way. He bought all the space he could with his inheritance. It was more than he could handle, so he just rented out space. Life was good. He continued to sell computers in his little store. I helped when I came home from school and on weekends. He kept bees, and I helped with that too. Life was good until he married Connie in 1994. She was a strange woman. She didn't like me. She was into things that scared me. I saw her make a homeless man cry by just staring at him. Animals would go quiet when she was near. Sometimes she would hide under my bed for hours, waiting for me to go to sleep at night. When I was asleep, she would slide out and grab me. I would scream and scream. She would just walk away like nothing happened. She wouldn't laugh or say anything. I didn't understand. I still don't. I started sleeping on the bean-bag chair in the basement. After that, she would often go into a corner of the room and whisper to someone. There was no one there, no phone or anything. She would even get angry with whoever that was. Then she would go back to knitting. She was always knitting something, but the things she knitted were useless. Mittens with 3 fingers, socks, but she would seal the end so you couldn't wear them. I didn't hate her. I was scared to death of her. I don't know why she made Uncle Joe so happy. I remember the day she started pressuring Uncle Joe to turn his rental spaces into internet cafes. She told him the internet was the real future and would last longer than computers. She would say, "We are the internet." She made him get it at home, even though it was really expensive. At that point, she made him go to this website she called the H. I remember that because it always made me nervous when she talked about it. Uncle Joe asked her who created it. She said she didn't know. No one knew. She found it already created like everyone else. She told him it called her. At the time I thought it sounded fake. Now it just gives me the creeps. Uncle Joe changed after that. They spent a lot of time on that website. I didn't understand it. There was nothing there. I looked over their shoulders and it was all empty. But they saw all sorts of things, and as internet cafes started opening, more people joined. It was strange. They would sit and stare into space and strange things would happen. Like I could swear I heard a voice in my modem when I dialed, and when I listened it was saying, "It hurts." I said it was all in my head. And another time I received an email asking, "Why can't I remember?" I don't know why that message made me so sad. I remember it very clearly. One night when I was alone with Uncle Joe once, I told him I wished things would go back to the way they were. He said that's what everyone wants, but it can't be. He leaned in close and whispered, "The H talks, tells us things." He told me about how, "This is strange and I don't understand it, but I'll try how humans are set up to be obsolete and they need to be upgraded for the new era." He said Y2K, if you remember that, wouldn't affect computers, it would affect humans. The H showed him how humans could put their souls on the internet and be upgraded. Everyone else would just degrade through generations into animals that kill, eat, and watch TV. I didn't dare tell Uncle Joe that this was crazy. I couldn't hurt his feelings like that, but I knew something bad was going to happen. Uncle Joe and Connie went off opening their internet cafes everywhere, and I left home for college. Uncle Joe kept in touch until 1999, then I lost him. Connie disappeared too. I know some bad things happened around those internet cafes, but it wasn't Uncle Joe's fault. Please don't blame him. I had many more questions, and I sent them to her. I never heard back, but at least she gave me some real answers, and they all led right back to the hole. So that really left me with one thing to do. I think I had to go to the hole after all, if I wanted to know what was happening. Anyway, I pulled up the instructions Angelica sent me on how to get back to the hole. I can't say I felt like I was doing the right thing. I didn't feel that. It felt very wrong, like there was something truly horrible off-screen in my memory. I knew it was there, but I couldn't see it, so I welcomed the interruption when my phone rang. My neighbor called to tell me the man in the bee costume was back. "He's standing in your front yard," he said. I went to the window and looked out. It was warm and pleasant inside, but I felt my entire body break out in goosebumps. He was there under the streetlight looking straight into the window. I asked the neighbor how long he had been there. He said, "I called you as soon as I saw it and I should hang up and call the police." I tried, but there was no point in calling the police. As soon as I hung up, he walked across the road and into the woods. I noticed as I hung up that I had an email notification from Ben. I was glad he was okay. He sent me a video. I played it immediately. In it, he said he had gone into hiding because things were getting strange. There were small things at first. Then one night a group of people he had never seen before knocked on his door at 3:00 a.m. He didn't answer. He watched through the peephole. They didn't move, didn't knock again, didn't try to look through the peephole. They just stood there staring at the door. They didn't look homeless or crazy, just people. He called through the door that they had the wrong address. They started to laugh loudly, a fake laugh. Then they silently walked away. He said he was getting calls where he only heard a dog growling on the other end, and then a few guttural words like why and abracadabra. Then he started having fits. He was a sad woman at the grocery store once. Anything I get involved with, he said, is bad luck like the KGB or the evil Illuminati. He just pointed the camera away from himself to a computer screen. It was an old webcam. Every 5 seconds it updated with a new image. But this one wasn't just pointing at my house like before, it was just pointing at an entrance in some dark room. Watch, he said. I watched. There was a shadow moving around. It could be nothing, but I waited and watched. I thought if it was nothing, Ben wouldn't keep filming. Finally, I saw something enter the frame. It was a man. The image was too blurry, hard to tell who at first. But when he turned, I saw it was Detective Thorough. It had to be Egypt. He was walking into Egypt's bathroom. Frame by frame, I watched him from looking in, shining a flashlight, then disappearing inside. After a few frames of no activity, a blurry figure appeared in one frame and vanished. It looked like someone in a robe running into the bathroom with a razor. I called the police department and told them what I thought I saw. Then I jumped in my car and started driving out there. I don't know what I hope to do. I'm not a fighter. I'm a data analyst. But I couldn't just watch something happen. The whole way I kept telling myself I was doing something stupid. When I got there, the post office parking lot was completely empty. Even the detective's car was nowhere to be found. I parked in front of the Egypt pub and went inside. It was set up like in the past, computers everywhere, a sign-up sheet on the counter, and no one was there. I called the detective, but at first I had no answer. Then I heard a response. It took me a moment to realize it was my own voice. It was the conversation I had with Angelica playing from one of the computers. On the screen was my old homepage. After all that time, I knew it immediately. Animated skeleton GIFs and links to conspiracy theories and Heaven's Gate. That page was deleted almost 2 decades ago. On another computer, I saw a video of a middle-aged couple staring at the camera as if they were watching me, and a little girl looking over their shoulders. The woman said, "It chose you," and the man shook his head slightly. He looked scared. Then another computer started playing a song. I didn't know it, but I recognized the sound of Vanity Fair again. That made me realize I had just walked into a trap. I had to get out, but I couldn't. These people started walking inside. A middle-aged woman with long black hair, well-dressed. An older businessman, so it seemed. A rough-looking homeless man. More and more people crowded in without saying anything. One of them was Angelica. I just knew it. They were moving towards me. I tried to talk to them, but their faces were blank, expressionless. They didn't seem to hear. I ran into the bathroom and slammed the door behind me. It had a simple bolt lock, so I locked it. I pulled out my phone to see if I could call the police, but there was no signal. That's when I remembered the story about the guy knocking on the wall. Maybe there weren't tiles on the other side. I knocked to find a hollow spot and started kicking a hole in the drywall high up. I ripped the rest of the hole open with my hands. There was space behind it, but it wasn't an exit or it wasn't obvious. I used my phone flashlight to look inside. The space was about 2 feet wide to the brick wall. I stepped in. A computer was running in the far corner of the space, just the tower, no screen or any way to interact with it. I heard the people breathing outside the door. They weren't trying to open it or break it down. They were breathing heavily at it. Then I saw something move under the door frame. I thought it was a finger sliding under, maybe trying to grab a shoelace or something, but it was too pink. It was a tongue. One of them was licking under the door. That scared me enough to go deeper into the space, stumbling over pieces of plaster. I tried to follow the wires on the computer to see if they went outside, but they didn't, so I grabbed the computer tower and used it to smash the brick wall, hoping to loosen the bricks. They didn't budge, but the computer shattered into pieces. I gave up. As I climbed back into the bathroom, I noticed 2 things. One, written above the hole I had just made. The hole was painted. The other, that wasn't plaster I was stumbling over, it was bones. I rushed out and sat in the cab by the bathroom for what felt like hours. I didn't come out until the detective showed up. He said no one was out there when he arrived. All the computers were gone when he took me out. He said he hadn't been there all day. Also, he didn't know what dog I was talking about, but the bones were there and very real. He said we would have a lot to discuss in the coming weeks and I needed to stop interfering. I agreed. I was done. The B guys, Moses, Angelica, the gopher page, they could do what they wanted. I was done. Oh, if anyone cares, I looked up the song I heard. It was Come Tomorrow. Part 9. I think it's really over now. Obviously, there were a lot of unresolved points after my last update. Too many. I think now I can piece most of them together, at least I'll try my best. I can't say I'm right about everything, but I think I'm close. First, here's what happened. After the incident at Egypt, I went home to relax and forget with a few recorded episodes of Seinfeld. It was the episode where George finds a doll that looks like his mother. I was letting my mind go blank, watching the screen, but I noticed the sound was sometimes off. I tried turning the TV and DVR off and on again. It seemed to fix it. It happened again, like voices would randomly double. A kind of echo. The next time it happened, I tried muting and unmuting the TV to see if that would help. That's when I noticed the echo seemed to be coming from behind me. That was strange because I didn't have surround sound or any other TV in the house. I left the TV on mute to listen carefully. Surely I wasn't just hearing some other background noise. I would understand if my mind was playing tricks on me after everything that had happened. Before I could turn the TV back on, I heard Kramer say, "Jerry, you don't really exist. You're just a part of me. I need you back inside." I dropped the remote without even realizing it. It fell to the floor and the batteries rolled out, scaring me even more than I was already scared. I grabbed my phone to call 911. It was dead, the battery had been removed. I felt truly in danger for the first time since all this began. Strange people were one thing, this felt like deliberate attempted murder. While I stood still, thinking, waiting for something to make me react, I heard my mother's voice. "I made you some blueberry pancakes, and you'll love how they feel inside your body." These are words I will surely never forget for the rest of my life. Whatever was making those sounds was not my mother. I haven't clarified the layout of my house. It's a 3-bedroom house, and I turned the last bedroom into my living room. I used the actual living room as my movie library. I wanted to be unique. That was a very stupid idea. To get out of the house, I would have to run straight to where the voice was coming from. My windows don't open, but I thought about smashing one. Then I heard the front door open. I was sure I had locked it. But I've been sure of so many wrong things lately. And someone yelled, "Come here quickly." I breathed a sigh of relief because I recognized Detective Thorough's voice. That guy was the pride of the profession. I thought I started towards the front door, trusting him to protect me. Something made me stop. My phone was ringing. The phone with no battery, no power. The caller ID was "Don't go." I answered and only heard the buzzing of bees. I don't pretend to understand this at all. What do bees have to do with anything? But I took the warning seriously. I turned back to my living room, closed the door, locked it, and smashed a window. I climbed out. I heard my father's voice screaming at me to get back in immediately. In any other context, that would have made me cry like Niagara Falls. I miss Dad so much, but I knew it wasn't my dad, and it felt much more evil because of it. "I own every drop of you," Dad's voice shrieked. I ran to my neighbor's house. He kindly let me in and allowed me to use his phone. His dogs went crazy, but nothing happened until the police arrived. They got here pretty quickly, and Detective Thorough was with them. They were in my house for 5 minutes before they came out with someone in handcuffs, kicking and struggling. It was definitely a woman. That's what happened, and that was the last time. Since that incident, nothing strange has happened. Life has been relatively peaceful, and I've been able to start the work of picking up the pieces. I've been able to think a bit. Not long, but from what I've heard from the police, Detective Thorough, and the independent investigators involved, this is what I've been able to piece together. Take it as you will. So first, there really was a girl named Angelica. I really did talk to her in the 90s. She had a good family, a good middle-class family, a good school, but she didn't like any of it. She liked computers, and that was it. When the internet came along, she could pretend to be anyone or anything. She liked that even more. Then she met me. Something about the way I talked to her made her like me because she became obsessed with me. Her bedroom was covered with sketches of me and her together. The investigators didn't know who it was at the time, and she had taken her hard drive, so it was just some boy. Maybe David Borinaz. As far as they knew, when she left home in 1999, it had nothing to do with the Hole or Egypt or Waitake. She left home to be with me, and she succeeded. I didn't know anything all that time, but she was with me. Without a computer, she didn't know how to communicate, so she just lived in the nooks and crannies of my house until I left for college in 2001. She slept under my bed, just like in the recreation of my bedroom at my old house. I don't know if she followed me to college. She wouldn't talk about that time, they said, but I suspect she just stayed there in my old bedroom, waiting for me to come back. After 18 years, she got tired of waiting. Something drove her crazy, I guess, because she started emailing me. She latched onto the Hole. I suppose because it truly was a secret website I shared with her. More on that later. Then she started building a mystery to draw me in. I'm not really sure why. I think maybe she was psychologically tethered to that room, or she thought it was the only way to distract me from my mundane life. The goal was to bring me back to her in some way. Over the years, she had watched me and listened to me for countless hours. She had trained herself to mimic the voices of almost everyone in my life. That even extended to the cast of Seinfeld. Apparently, she used her technical knowledge to mimic online acquaintances like Ben just on vacation. All of it was a trick. She had carefully and skillfully manipulated me every step of the way. I was a complete puppet. I don't know if I ever confused her even once. But where it all was supposed to end was me back in my room in the old house. Finding my room the way it used to be with the old dial-up modem, my old computer tower, my old VCR, and a PlayStation 1 hooked up ready to play. It was like being a teenager again. I think she expected me to just revert to my old self. Maybe she thought eventually she would come out of hiding and we would do it differently this time. Maybe it was just nostalgia on overdrive, or something I did messed it up. Or she couldn't bring herself out of hiding because it didn't end there, so she continued the mystery. Drawing me back to Egypt by impersonating Ben and the detective, hiring those people to scare me. What did she expect to happen from there? I don't know. I can guarantee she has read every one of these updates. Perhaps seeing her name tied into my life story every week is enough for her. It's sad, but it's also terrifying. That kind of obsession is never satisfied for long. That's Thoreau's words. I'm not that philosophical. He told me if I had gone towards his voice that night, instead of going out the window, I would have died. He didn't want to tell me what she had planned for me. He said I would sleep better never knowing. The unsettling flicker in his eyes told me all I needed to know. If it could unsettle him, it must be pretty bad. That leaves a lot of mysteries. Right? What about Egypt? Joseph Vanek? The pub that popped up out of nowhere. Well, the pub is easy. That was a group of community college students and their calculus professor partying in an abandoned space. They didn't want to get caught, so they pretended to be a pub and meticulously put everything back as it was. Egypt is pretty easy too. So Joseph Vanek and his niece were not actually Angelica's invention. How much more of the mysterious aspects of the story are true? I tend to be skeptical. The police have been able to confirm that Egypt was indeed a front for an apocalyptic cult, and they really did kidnap children to digitize their souls. The niece knew about this and said nothing. I was introduced to the thehole through Egypt. The website might have been created as a joke, mysterious enough to captivate them. They believed it was something supernatural. Angelica knew about it through me. She never participated in their sessions. I did. They gave us drugs and made us stare at the thehole. Then we were supposed to look out and feel our souls being digitized. Teenagers who showed the most promise or susceptibility to brainwashing were taken. It's an active investigation now. The bones in the wall were adult human bones. The teenagers were never seen again. Neither was Vanek, so no one knows what they did with them. I'm just glad I wasn't good enough to be one of their chosen few. And that's it. That's what I know. It doesn't answer everything, like whose bones were in the wall. How did Angelica know so much about Egypt without any connection to them? Some things time will tell, some things we may never know. I accept that. There's only one thing that bothers me, because the more I think about it, the less sure I feel about everything. Like the last piece of the puzzle, but it doesn't quite fit into the last empty space. It was one of the things Angelica had in her possession. It was an old VHS tape. I didn't want to watch it alone, so I watched it with my mother. It turned out to be a good idea. It was actually one of our few family videos. Halloween 1989. Dad holding the camera, coming to our bathroom where Mom was finishing my costume. Mom backed away and I jumped out. Dad hummed. "A bee," Dad said. "Holy Moses." That's all. Part 10. I want to thank you all for your patience with me. I realize I owe you an explanation, and you'll get it as much as possible. I'm writing this from a public library. I don't want to carry any electronic devices. It just makes me too vulnerable. After I left Egypt the last time, I went home and sat down to watch a recorded episode of Seinfeld with some chai tea, anything to soothe my nerves. As soon as I sat down, I received an email notification on my phone saying, "Please look," and provided a link. I didn't recognize the number, but since the link was to a GR University page, I thought it was Ben. The link took me to the webcam Ben found a few weeks ago on the Gopher server. I was already regretting my decision to trust it. I felt fear, frustration, and anger rise because I just wanted to be left alone and I couldn't have any peace. Soon there was only fear I felt because I noticed something was happening. My car trunk was opening. When the frame updated 4 seconds later, the trunk was fully open and someone was crawling out. I guess I was mesmerized because I just kept watching, waiting for the next frame update. By the next frame, he was standing at my door. I went to the front door and looked through the peephole. No one was there. I looked at the phone again to check the webcam. Someone was or should be standing right in front of it. Maybe it was something that happened in the past. I looked through the peephole again and it was blocked. It took me a moment to realize I was looking straight into someone's face, a horrible face full of hatred. I brought the phone with me to the office and locked the door. I heard my front door handle click, then open. I knew I had locked it. I don't know how he managed that. Whoever it was walked in with purpose, straight to the office as if they already knew where I was going. I didn't have much faith in the lock. I expected the door to fly open immediately. Instead, I heard a strange, distant voice. It sounded like a weather radio saying, "Why did you leave?" I called 911. I heard the operator pick up, but I couldn't speak. The door opened and this person walked in. His face was blurry, but it was familiar. He had some kind of weapon. He forced me to the computer and to the hole. He led me through it step by step. I had no choice, I did it. After all those years, there it was, the same bland page, seemingly doing nothing, but I could feel it like fingers poking at my brain. It was like I was still in my office, but the guy was gone. Other things were too. I could see things that were always there but not really there. I guess you'd say they were in other dimensions, but that's not right either. And it's not like here, where everything is ordered and makes sense. Everything is ordered wrong. I was still on the phone with 911, I realized. I tried to tell the operator the man was gone. Nothing I said came out right. And the operator was telling me, "You'll be in big trouble when Captain comes. Have you ever heard of freaking?" Ben asked me. It was disorienting, but I knew immediately I was looking at Ben and I wasn't in my house. There was a guy standing with Ben whom I didn't recognize. I asked if I was at GR and how I got there. He assured me I was in a motel in my hometown. He no longer trusted technologically assisted communication, so he drove all the way to talk to me, and he introduced his associate, Milky. He had found him hiding in a Catholic community in rural Ontario. They said I was in serious danger. Milky said at the time his voice was slurred. He was aware of it because he apologized for it. He went on to tell me what had happened to him. He said he had been a part of this hacking community for years. Not for profit, just good old-fashioned classic mischief. They especially liked to mess with extremist and religious groups. They started on IRC. When Very Baby became a thing, they moved to a web forum. One day, a hidden link appeared on the forum. The other members tried to delete it and insisted that no one touch it. One of the guys on the forum, one of their oldest members who had fled the Soviet Union back in the 70s, said he knew what it was. It had been studied before and it was never, ever to be made available to the public. He had seen what Stalin could do, what killers could do, and he wasn't afraid. This thing scared him. Sounds like a fake, Milky said. This guy had a good sense of humor, but that guy swore it was real. He said starting a long time ago when the first computers were being networked, electrons and other particles were brought together and massed in the creation of these connections, leaving empty voids of nothing where they had once been. It was like an antenna, and the more we connected throughout the world, this antenna grew. And what's scary about that? Someone on the forum asked, and he replied, just because it's empty space doesn't mean there's nothing in it. He wouldn't explain that in detail. However hard they tried, Milky thought the guy didn't want to make them curious about it. That failed. He was more curious about it than ever, so he clicked the link. He remembered being disappointed about it because it was just a blank page. But after clicking it, he started to notice strange things happening. He lost track of time. He would have acquaintances tell him he had done things he didn't remember doing or couldn't even do because he was doing something else. This time he heard his dog barking. It was 3:00 a.m. He got up to see what was happening. The dog was standing at the entrance to his living room just barking nonstop. He expected to find a mouse stuck there. But he said he remembered being so startled that he tried to scream, but no sound came out. 2 men in suits were sitting on his sofa. He immediately thought of a gang murder. But this is Canada, what gang? He turned on the light. They didn't move, they looked like normal businessmen. They were staring at the floor. He told them to get out of his house or he would call the police. They just stood up and left. On the way out, one of them said, "You asked us to come and sit here." He never saw those men again in his life. Another time, he called his brother in Vancouver to wish him a happy birthday. They had a pleasant conversation and he hung up, continuing his work. About an hour later, it hit him like a punch to the gut. His brother had died 2 years ago. He always called him on his birthday. He just did it reflexively, and when he got an answer, it was like the old days. So who was he talking to? His stories sounded very similar to the ones the fake Angelica told me when I talked to her a few weeks ago. So either I was talking to the real Angelica then, or maybe this isn't the real Ben and Milky. I guess I can't be sure of anything anymore. At least believing they are real will be less scary. During this time, he continued to check them. He wanted to find it. Now he thinks it's controlling him. He doesn't remember the things he saw when he visited. But he said the old Soviet was right, it's not empty. What he saw there, his brain wouldn't let him remember. I just want to know why. Why is all this happening? Ben stepped in here. He said there was only one way he could think of for this page, if it could be called that, to affect the mind in that way, it had to be electronic emissions. It somehow had to be able to read them from us and also create them. It was a technique that had been experimented with as a form of freaking, but never with biological systems. As for why, he didn't think there was any purpose. It just is there and does what it does. It's an Antoinette. It introduces emptiness, division, and chaos instead of connection. It's just a byproduct of its existence. And its existence is a byproduct of the internet. Like angry Facebook arguments are a byproduct of the internet. It was never meant to be something you could just navigate to. It's theoretical, something a few computer scientists knew about. Somehow, someone leaked it out there, and it first appeared buried on the Heaven's Gate website. After their mass suicide, it spread to hacking pages, gothic pages, fringe conspiracy pages of the internet. That was a lot to take in, and I'm not sure how much I truly believe. Furthermore, apparently several hours had passed since the man forced me to click on the hole. During that time, I had written and published the previous part of this story. I have read it over and over now, and it seems very strange and purposeful. The only part of it that's true is that I was watching Seinfeld, and I really did dress up as a bee for Halloween once. But my father never touched a video camera in his life. Milky said I had put a link to the hole in that post, but he had taken the liberty of editing it out. There's no way to destroy the Antoinette. What we can do is make sure there are no more links to it out there. The thing about the internet is it's really hard to erase anything. I suddenly remembered what the 911 operator told me. I asked Milky, "Who is Captain?" He was shaving when I asked him. His hand stopped moving. I saw in the mirror tears forming in his eyes. He was clearly trembling. He said, "Captain Meat. It looks like a dog." Then he went back to shaving like nothing happened. After that, I thanked Ben and Milky for saving me, for risking so much, truly, especially Ben, and for trying to warn me with the link to the webcam. But both of them denied sending that message. They asked to see it, they couldn't figure out where it came from. They also checked the link to the webcam, it was still working. It was the front of my house. My car with the trunk still open. We watched it for a few frame updates before Ben noticed someone in the trunk. It was dark and open, but someone was definitely there. And I shivered as we all agreed that whoever that was, they were looking straight at us. We turned it off. I think I'm closer to solving this than before, and I'm not so alone now. I realize I won't be able to just relax and avoid it. And there are other victims out there, people like Angelica and the other missing children. I don't know how much I believe in real life right now. Part 11. I woke up in the middle of the night a few nights ago. We didn't want to keep paying for the motel, so we ended up staying with my mother. Mom was happy to have company, and she was clearly worried about me. She said I needed to get a grip and not let life slip away. "Just deal with this," Mom said. It was strange. That's not the kind of thing my mother would say. Anyway, I was awake because I was hearing whispering. You'd think louder sounds would wake you. But no, whispering is the worst. I listened carefully. I tried not to move. I wanted to hear where they were coming from. It was a two-way conversation, however I couldn't make out any of the content, just a word here and there. I slowly got up and looked towards the corner of the room. That's where I thought the sounds were coming from. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust. When they did, I saw Milky kneeling in front of one of the electrical outlets. He was whispering something into it, then turning his head and waiting, and the whispering replied. He saw I was looking then and said, "Neat trick, right?" I guess that's ventriloquism, but why do that alone in the middle of the night? My nerves were shot. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen for water. I could see someone standing on the front porch through the kitchen window. Thinking Ben also couldn't sleep, I went out to ask him if Milky was actually okay, because he didn't seem okay. I turned on the outside light and stepped out. But it wasn't Ben out there, it was Milky again. He tried to tell me something about constellations, but I stepped back inside. Something wasn't adding up. There's no way he could have gotten out there so fast. Neat trick, right? I went into the living room, the TV was on. It was the Seinfeld episode where George finds a doll that looks like his mother. That unsettled me, so I changed the channel. The program guide said the ninth gate would be on. I always liked that movie, but instead of the ninth gate, it was the 10 Commandments. Very different movies, only one number apart. I guess it was almost Easter, so not that strange. Seeing Heston's Moses posing with the Egyptians caught my attention. I had never been able to talk to Holy Moses. I let myself be distracted, thrown off, or both. And everything that was happening seemed to be increasingly full of coincidences and connections that didn't fit, or fit too well. It was the same thing. If you ask me, I booted up my mother's computer. It was still running Windows XP. It was Dad's computer and Mom doesn't like change. I had to download my RC. As soon as I did, I connected to FNET. This time I would talk to him. He wasn't hard to find, just one W, and he was there in N1. He was the only one there besides me. Before I could send him a message, an email notification popped up on the screen. I guess Mom had left it to auto-start. The notification caught my attention because it said it was from Detective Thorough. Subject, information requested. I shouldn't have, but because it was from the detective, I felt it had to be related to my situation. I clicked on it and read. He said, as we discussed, this is the documentation of the dental records with the doctor's signature. The attached document was about remains found in Egypt. I felt a sudden wave of dread because I thought I knew what was coming. Dad's bones were somehow in there, but I was wrong. They matched the skeleton to my dental records. Mine, the detective concluded with, I don't know who that man is, but he's not your son. That was ridiculous. I know my own mother. Oh my God. I thought about deleting the email, but that wouldn't help. Then I started piecing things together, wondering if maybe I was actually dead or maybe I was an imposter. And that's why I had memory gaps. Then I remembered I was just about to message Holy Moses. Why was something always happening when I was about to message him? I went back to IRC and sent a private message asking, who are you? No reply. I received an abrupt message from U4728 for you telling me, do you know where your mother is? I ignored him. I sent another message to Holy Moses. Do you know what's going on? No reply. U4728 for you wrote, are you sure she's okay? I took a gamble with what I remembered from Angelica's story. I sent Holy Moses a short message. This immediately triggered a file transfer which I accepted. It was a video file. It downloaded in about 5 minutes. If Holy Moses was as old as they said, this video would have taken a day or two back then. Milky walked in from outside, stood a few feet from me and stared at me. That was creepy enough. Then the pantry door started to open. Ben walked out. He must have been curled up in there the whole time. He all stood still and just stared at me. My mother walked in from outside. Why was she outdoors and where? She joined Milky and Ben. What's going on? I asked. They didn't speak. I felt tension in the air and the certainty that something was going to happen. The suspense and silence were becoming worse than anything they could do to me. My heart was pounding so fast, and I had been hearing dripping for a minute or two without noticing. Too much was happening. Now I looked to where the sound was coming from. I saw fat bugs crawling out from Milky's sleeve, over his hand, and dropping to the floor. What was going on? I think I was too scared to feel anything anymore. Slowly, I grabbed a loose USB dongle, plugged it into my phone and into the computer. I was surprised that old computer could read the phone, but it did. While they stared at me, I transferred the video file to my phone. I unplugged the dongle, grabbed my phone, and ran into the bathroom where I locked myself in. I heard footsteps scrambling to the door and stopping there. I turned on the shower to drown out the noise, then started watching the video. The webcam used was severely damaged. It seemed, but I could make out an older man who looked very sick. The sound was distorted, and I had the shower on, so I had to start over and turn up the volume. The man said he had tried to warn me. The modulation in the hole allowed him to send messages in short windows. If I was hearing this, he said I was in the hole and had been for a while. Other things were in here too. While he spoke, I kept hearing screams in the background of the audio. Some sounded closer than others. He said these things didn't want me to go anywhere. I needed to get out before it was too late. He knew, he said, because I am you. The last thing he said before the video ended abruptly was the birds and the bees. I couldn't leave through the door, so I pulled up the curtain to leave through the bathroom window. I nearly screamed when I saw my mother's face pressed against the window. I was trapped. I thought about pushing through anyway, but I couldn't hit my mother. I just wasn't raised that way. I could hit Ben or Milky if I had to, so I chose the door. No one was there. That just made me anxious about where they actually were. I stepped out and still no one was there. I hurried to my car before Mom could come around from behind, then I heard fast footsteps. Ben was running straight towards me from a distance down the street. As he got closer, he started screaming, "Stop hurting me," but he didn't look hurt. He looked angry. I got in the car and started to back up. As he reached me, he was pounding on the window, still screaming. I drove straight to my house, leaving them all behind. The only possible explanation was that I was in the hole, whatever that meant, because there's no other way Ben and my mother would act like that. But when did it happen? What does it mean? What is real? Is anything I'm writing actually going online? I don't understand any of it. Before I even entered the house, I knew something was wrong. Waves of something just bad, pure bad, were washing over me. I opened it. It looked normal. I started turning on all the lights and I got a knife from the kitchen drawer. Then I saw them. 2 men in bee costumes sitting on my treadmill, looking down at the floor, not moving, almost like they were stuffed or had forgotten where they were. "What do you want from me?" I asked. I held the knife tightly. They stood up, then both looked down the hall towards my office. I followed their gaze but saw nothing there. After a few seconds of wondering what they saw, I heard the song start. Early in the morning. While I was looking down the hall, they were already moving towards the door. I decided to follow them because whatever started that music felt worse to me than they did. As I stepped out the door, I was sure I heard a dog growling behind me. I followed them across the road and into the woods. I turned on my phone flashlight so I could follow them. It was like they could see in the dark, the way they all headed for the woods. The deeper I went, the more unnerved I became. They seemed to just keep going and going. But the deeper I went, the more I started to hear birds. I had never even thought about it before, but I hadn't heard any birds in a long time. At least weeks, or cicadas, or any normal spring sounds. The further I followed the bees, the more birds I heard. Until they were loud enough, I thought we must be under a large cluster of bird nests. I kept following them until it was too loud to bear. And then it sounded like machinery, like an elevator. And then I was back in my office, sitting at my desk, slumped over the keyboard. The corner of my mouth was wet. I sat up. It felt like I had just woken up from a deep sleep. The room was bright with sunlight. I could hear birds chirping loudly outside. My screensaver was on, when I moved the mouse just to check the time. The last email from Angelica with instructions to get to the hole was open, but I knew time had passed. I knew I hadn't just been sitting in the office the whole time. Someone would notice, call for a wellness check or something. Weeks had passed, and you've been reading this over a period of weeks. This didn't just appear one day. I know what I'm supposed to think. I just don't know how to comprehend it. I sat disoriented for a while before realizing I had to pee, eat, and drink. When I had done those things, I looked around the house for clues. The knife I had taken was back where it belonged. My old computer had been put away in a box. I called my mother to ask if she was okay. She didn't remember any of the events I mentioned, nor ever meeting any men in bee costumes. I called Detective Thorough. He said, "I've been in contact with him about a lead on missing children, but he can't corroborate my statements." I asked if there really were missing children. He said, "Sir, there are always missing children," and hung up. I sent an email to Angelica asking her if she was alive or missing or needed help. She replied pretty quickly. She didn't answer my questions. She said, "Pretty intense, right? You can spend the rest of your life in there." That's when I remembered the video on my phone from Holy Moses. I checked and it was still there. I knew I wasn't dreaming. I played it again. This would be my proof. The video was 2 minutes of distorted audio and video. In all the distortion, no recognizable sounds or images. That was a few days ago. It took me a while to readjust to reality. Nothing strange has happened since. I can't explain what happened. Maybe I had a psychotic break. I was under a lot of stress at work. Maybe someone was gaslighting me extensively. Maybe there really is a secret website that uses electronic waves to mess with your mind. Or you might think maybe I'm just making everything up. A sad internet nerd who loves the internet and change. I'm just glad it's over. I'm glad to be back to working as a normal person. Making banana smoothies, not thinking about creepy internet cafes. I really missed Egypt and the hole, and it's like reality all twisted up. I'll just end by saying I don't think I'll feel any nostalgia for the old days of the internet for a long, long time. I'll start appreciating nature and the much better organized reality instead. Abracadabra.